This is my friend's childhood PlayStation Vita. He got it in 2013 and had it for only a few months until it fell and the screen broke. Since then, it sat in his closet, waiting to be fixed and used again. Replacement screens for these OLED Vitas are surprisingly cheap these days, from AliExpress at least. The screen I picked up being only 22 bucks Canadian shipped. The price seemed a bit too good to be true, and it kinda was. I'll explain why at the end of the video. I wasn't happy with just replacing the screen though. I also picked up this Type-C charging port replacement because everyone knows where to find one of these cables. But one of these cables... What the hell is even that? And assuming all goes well with that, I can then mod it for him, so he can dump and play all the physical Vita games that he definitely owns. Enough talking, let's get this thing taken apart. Getting the back panel off the Vita was pretty straightforward. It's held together with just 8 standard Phillips screws. Now it's just a matter of disconnecting everything. I like how the D-pad and the other button pad board is separate from the Vita motherboard itself, and how all 3 boards are just held in with a few screws and clips. Disconnecting the broken screen, the motherboard is now free. Since the replacement Vita screen came with, well, just the screen itself and not the frame, I had to essentially prepare the old frame for surgery, aka having its face ripped off through the use of extreme heat. Using a heat gun, I was able to get the old glass and damaged screen separated from the plastic frame. I got a little careless and melted the old screen a bit in the process, but thankfully the plastic frame underneath was fine, which is what mattered. This poor screen's been through so much. After getting the screen removed, I cleaned up the leftover adhesive using some isopropyl. Now the frame is clean and ready for the new screen. When attaching the new screen, I fed its screen cable through this top cutout, which was incorrect. I should have fed it through the bottom one. This made reassembly much harder, as I had way less screen cable to work with when reattaching it to the motherboard. Now it's the hard part. Removing the old charging port was the hardest part of this whole project. The port is held in with 4 anchor points, secured with what I'm pretty sure is unleaded solder, which has a much higher melting point compared to the 60% tin, 40% lead solder that I'm using. Adding the leaded solder to the anchors and pins definitely helped, and with lots of heat, flux, and patience, I got it removed. The old charging port got destroyed in the process, but in my eyes it deserved it for being proprietary. Once I got it removed, I saw this hanging strand of copper. I thought I ripped a pad or something, but turns out it was just part of the melted charging port. I got rid of it and cleaned up the pads. To install the replacement USB-C board, we need to sort of sandwich these 4 pads here onto the corresponding 4 pads on the Vita board, and then to use hot air to melt the solder between the pins to make the connection. To prevent damage caused by misalignment of the USB-C board, and to prevent solder bridges, people who do this mod highly recommend using UV solder mask to cover some of the pads we don't plan on using. I thought I had some UV solder mask lying around, but I just couldn't find it. What I could find was some Loca UV glue, and I figured it would do the trick. What ended up working for me was applying and hardening the UV glue over all the necessary pads, then removing just the glue covering the 4 pads that I needed exposed. In my infinite wisdom, I somehow forgot to record the bit where I actually used the hot air gun to flow the solder between the new charging port and the motherboard. My artistic recreation from earlier is pretty accurate to how it went though. Once that was done, I secured the 4 new anchors. I cleaned up those hideous solder joints afterwards, don't worry. With the new screen installed and the charging port swapped, let's plug it in, turn it on, and see if we get a picture on the new screen and if it takes a charge through our new port. I attached a USB-C cable and immediately saw the orange charging indicator light up. That's a good sign. Let's turn it on and see what happens. Looking good so far. Touchscreen works too. And if we look at the top of the screen, next to the Entertainment folder, we can confirm that we are indeed charging via USB-C. Now that we know everything's working, let's get it reassembled. I tidied up those 4 anchor points and got rid of all that excess flux. Now let's get everything back together. And in true Redditor fashion, I peeled that plastic the first chance that I got. Finally, this Vita has a working screen for the first time in over a decade, along with a charging port that lets us use our cables from this decade. I'm not exaggerating when I say that the screen was broken for over a decade. I checked the firmware and this thing was on version 2.61, a firmware version which came out in August of 2013, and by checking the battery stats through the PSVita Homebrew app, we can see that this battery only got fully charged less than 50 times ever. This Vita is mint. Once I confirmed that the rest of the system functioned properly, there's just one thing left to do: to mod it. Modding a Vita these days is a breeze. I just followed the instructions over at vita.hacks.guide, and within minutes, this Vita was running ENSO custom firmware. And afterwards, I got that SD to Vita adapter set up and configured in order to extend the Vita's storage using a regular old microSD card. And just like that, it was modded and ready to go. This Vita went from sitting unused in a closet with a broken screen to having a brand new screen with a new USB-C charging port to match, ready to play all the legally acquired games it never got a chance to in its life. Now, about that screen. While I was modding the Vita, I noticed some weird behavior. If I woke the Vita up from sleep mode with the charger plugged in or with headphones connected, the touch screen would become totally unresponsive. Trying to re-enter sleep mode from this state would then lead to a crash. In both cases, a reboot solves the issue. At first I thought I messed something up during the charging port replacement, but after some digging online, it seemed that this behavior was actually linked to the aftermarket screen that I installed. As it turns out, a lot of the aftermarket Vita OLEDs available on AliExpress exhibit these same issues. People report that there may be good and bad batches of these screens, but I'm not sure if you can tell them apart before purchasing without just reading the reviews and crossing your fingers. I checked the reviews for the screen that I bought, and sure enough, others complain about the exact same freezing and touch issues. Now personally, I could probably live with this weird behavior surrounding sleep mode, but since this isn't my Vita, I feel bad giving it back to someone knowing it has a problem that it didn't have before. I explained the situation to my friend, and he was just happy that the Vita was functioning at all again. I promised him that if a new supplier comes along that sells screens without these issues, I'll swap the screen for him. After all, we both figured that a somewhat buggy PS Vita with USB-C charging is better than having no working Vita at all. So that's it for this Vita and this video, at least for now. I had a blast working on it, even though it technically didn't come out perfectly with the screen and all, but it's definitely in better shape than it was when it came into me. Plus it now has a snazzy new USB-C port. If you like this video and you want to see more repair and modding videos like these in the future, make sure to subscribe, because there's plenty more on their way. In the meantime, you can check out my previous upload where I fixed a broken NVIDIA GPU using just software. But until then, stay safe and I'll see you next time.